Figma is an amazing design tool. We can all agree about that. And recently, they have just released some new advanced prototyping features like variables. A lot of designers are saying things like this.
I don't think there's any reason to use any other tools besides Figma. I think if you can't do it in Figma, you shouldn't have to do it at all.
Don't get me wrong, Figma is a great tool, but I never want to be such a fanboy that I say this is the only tool, it has to be this tool. Instead, I would rather have a mindset that says use the right tool for the job when you need it. And I'm going to be really honest, when it comes to advanced prototypes, Figma is going to hit a ceiling at a certain point and you might need more, and that is when I like to start moving over to a tool like ProtoPie. I'm a pretty big fan of the feature set that is inside of ProtoPie, and it does one thing and one thing really well. It does super realistic, high definition, advanced prototyping, tapping into all sorts of things that you can't get inside of Figma. When is the right time to use one versus the other? Figma is first and foremost an amazing design tool, so you should most definitely be using Figma for all of your design needs. I love FigJam for concepting, I love Figma for wireframes, I love Figma files for high fidelity, and I even like it for some basic interaction. But as we start moving into the prototype realm, there's going to be some good reasons to stick inside of Figma, and here they are. Basic interaction should all be done inside of Figma. So if you need some sort of button hover or some sort of really simple micro interaction or micro animation, that stuff can stay inside of Figma. There's no use to bring in the big guns for that. Next, I would say early stage prototypes. So if you're doing a low fidelity design or maybe wireframes and you want to prototype those like screen to screen, does this flow make sense? Does it work for our users? All of that could and should stay inside of Figma. Next up, let's talk about simple cause and effect interactions. We're talking about checking a checkbox or a radio box, or maybe even toggling some sort of switch on or off. All of that stuff can be done using Figma's components and interactive components and basic prototyping there. Really easy to do. Keep all that inside of Figma. Next up, if you want some sort of nifty transition or linear-based transition or animation, all of that stuff can be done inside of Figma as well. Maybe you want to swipe a card, maybe you want some sort of animated carousel. Those things that are linear, that are basic, that just require basic easing, timing, and triggers, all of that stuff too can stay inside of Figma. So all of those are great reasons and use cases to stay inside of Figma. But when should you transition over to ProtoPie? Let's talk about some good reasons. First up, let's talk about prototypes that have multiple states with dependencies. Here's what I mean. If I'm working on some sort of prototyping screen and dependent on what I select here, when I confirm or hit some sort of next button, it's going to lead me to lots of other different places depending on what I selected. That's what we call complex logic, and ProtoPie is going to be much better at handling all that complex logic. Another use case for ProtoPie is when you have cause and effect interactions that will then trigger and affect multiple other things throughout your application. This means one tap of a button or one toggle of a switch will change how the actual application interacts with you. Maybe we're talking about theme, maybe we're talking about language, maybe we're talking about what information is surfaced to you in the database. All of those have a higher level of complexity, and you would be better off using a tool like ProtoPie to do it. Next up, I would talk about really complex and non-traditional trigger types. Those are going to be better served inside of something like ProtoPie. In Figma, you have trigger types like point and click and hover and drag, and those are all great. But what if I want something a little bit more complex, a little bit more unique? For instance, inside of ProtoPie, I can create an interface that has cards, and those cards can each have multiple interactions and triggers built into them. So as I drag them this way or that way, they do something. If I click, move, hover, pull, if I double click, long press, if I swipe up, all of those things are individually complex, combined together to make a really interesting recipe that becomes very unique and very original. I think another good use case for ProtoPie would be what we call multi-model interactions. This means more complex data types, more complex interaction types like text input, video, voice feedback. All of those are much better served inside of a tool like ProtoPie than they would be inside of a tool like Figma. Another great use case for ProtoPie over Figma would be that ProtoPie has the ability to do multiple device interaction. That means I can set up this Snapchat-like text inbox, and I can actually have two devices connect to the same prototype on a shared cloud server, and those two devices can actually chat back and forth between one another, and it's all happening in real time, and it's based off of one prototype. That is something that is impossible pretty much anywhere else besides ProtoPie. Lastly, and this one is super complex, you can use ProtoPie to build custom interactions using custom hardware and APIs. That means we can attach our prototype to custom hardware, custom physical hardware that people can actually push buttons and do things, and we can use our own APIs and insert them inside of it, actually calling back real information and working hands-on with whatever sort of software or hardware we're using. That is some super advanced stuff right there. Now we've come to the point of the video where I recommend which one of these tools you should use. If you out there that think I'm about to say you should use one or the other, you're dead wrong. These tools are like peanut butter and jelly. They belong together. They go so well with one another. And in this modern design and prototyping landscape, you would be foolish to choose one over the other. So use Figma when it suits and fits your workflow best. But when you start needing a little bit more power, a little bit more of those advanced features, you should be comfortable moving over to ProtoPie and understanding how to use it. If you don't know how to use ProtoPie, I've done some introductory videos on it. I'll put some cards here and links down in the description. You should definitely watch those and get familiar with ProtoPie because it is here to stay and it is a tool that is made for the future. At the end of the day, if you prefer to use a tool that I didn't even talk about today, then right on, good for you. Use whatever tool works best for you and your team and your workflow and your process and your product. Don't listen to anybody online tell you what you should use. Use what works best. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I do lots of videos about design, development, and prototyping just like this one. So ring that bell so you know when another video like this one comes out. Check the description down below for some helpful links to Figma, ProtoPie, and a bunch of other tools that I think are helpful. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. I hope you're having an amazing week. Hope you're designing amazing things. Hope you're making amazing things. And I hope you're using the right tool for the job. We'll see you in the next one.